Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence, we go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, guys. Today's date, July 13th, 2022, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, most Will Buchanan. How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense of it all. Before we get started, guys, let you know that we are a family-friendly podcast, as we try to be. And yes, we are trying some new settings here, guys. So trying to see what works and what not. Trying to update it because I know you guys are getting tired of looking at my living room. So I decided I want to change things up and see how it works. But anyway, that being said, guys, again, things that might be shown and also viewership may, like I said, for the young and intended, be advised. Aside from that, welcome. So how do we start this? Well, I keep telling you guys that as we ever get so closer to the November elections, that Democrats are going to have a very difficult time. I've been saying that. Not wrong about that. The Democrats are going to have a very difficult time, especially with getting voters, things of that nature. But the Republicans, they seem to keep giving gifts. And again, with Mr. Josh Hawley, a senator who literally has no scientific backing whatsoever, has decided to go one-on-one with a very well-educated woman. And it was like bringing a knife to a gunfight.
The people with a capacity for pregnancy, would that be women?
Many women, cis women, have the capacity for pregnancy. Many cis women do not have the capacity for pregnancy. There are also trans men who are capable of pregnancy, as well as non-binary people who are capable of pregnancy.
So this isn't really a women's rights issue.
We can recognize that this impacts women while also recognizing that it impacts other groups. Those things are not mutually exclusive, Senator Hawley.
Oh, so your view is that the core of this right then is about what?
So I want to recognize that your line of questioning is transphobic, and it opens up trans people to violence by not recognizing that.
Wow, you're saying that I'm opening up people to violence by asking whether or not women are the folks who can have pregnancies?
So I want to note that 1 out of 5 transgender persons have attempted suicide. So I think it's important
because of my line of questioning? So we can't talk about it?
Because denying that trans people exist and pretending not to know that they exist.
I'm denying that trans people exist by asking you if you're talking about women having pregnancies?
Do you believe that men can get pregnant?
No, I don't think women can get
So
pregnant.
you are denying that trans people exist?
And that leads to violence? Is this how you run your classroom? Are students allowed to question you?
Absolutely.
Or are they also treated like this? Where
No,
they're told that they're opening up people to violence?
We have a good time in my class. You should join.
I bet.
You might learn a lot.
Wow, I would learn a lot. I've learned a lot just in this exchange.
Absolutely.
Extraordinary.
Yep.
Now, for the simple fact of the matter, guys, that was just over the legal ramifications of Roe v. Wade being overturned. And Senator Josh Hawley, in my opinion, if Ben Shapiro was a little bit older and gained more Tucker Carlson, you'd have Josh Hawley, I should say. But it is amazing to me. This is the conservative stance. And this is why I stand and say this the entire time. Democrats, if I were you, and if you don't believe that you can legalize marijuana and decriminalize it before November, if you cannot apparently say that the entire student loan debt of America needs to be cleared out, and that's not possible either, you might want to listen to a brand new crop of voters right alongside women who 9 times out of 10, if encouraged, may not vote Republican this year. Keep in mind, he's only asking questions in which conservatives don't ask questions at these Senate hearings. They want to simply go with the fact of their religious beliefs, because that's what it's based off of. They can sit there and say, oh, it's not religious, oh, it's not this, oh, it's not that, but it comes back to that. Why? Because that's the GOP's mantra. God, gun, and country. Sometimes the hierarchy may change. But the simple fact of the matter is he basically wasted his time and the taxpayers' time instead of actually doing the right thing and actually preserving the active choice, decided at that point, let me just make a mockery of everything that's going on and just go from there. Well, I have to give that professor credit. She sat there and stood her ground and was like, yeah, it's transphobic. What you're asking is a transphobic question. At the same time, it's like, well, and it's amazing. I mean, he scoffed her off. Like, would I just ask a transphobic question? Yes, dumb shit. You know exactly what you asked. But because you have this air of white privilege / Trumpism around you, you just feel like you can say whatever you want. And at the same time, I can't put this all on white folks. I can't put it all on white folks because right now there's a certain person that's running for Senate in Georgia, and I'm trying to figure out how he's still in office after he sat there and said that he graduated, knowing he didn't, was in law enforcement, found out that was a lie, said that Jesus had multiple personality disorder because he has bipolarism himself. And now Senate hopeful Herschel Walker has delivered us another tidbit about air in China. You cannot make this up.
Candidate Herschel Walker about climate change and air quality in an argument opposing the Green New Deal.
Since we don't control the air, our good air decided to float over to China, bad air. So when China gets our good air, their bad air gotta move. So it moves over to our good air space. And now we gotta clean that back up.
So a report issued by IQ Air, a company that tracks global air quality, earlier this year showed that U.S. air pollution exceeded WHO guidelines by 2 to 3 times. But Walker's argument is that since our good air decides to float over to China, then it's pointless for the U.S. to do more to reduce air pollution.
So I have to ask this question. Who is Herschel Walker's speechwriter? Because if he's writing all these himself, that makes sense. But I'm scratching my head over the fact of who thought this was a good idea? The good air that we have goes over to China, becomes bad air, and then somehow comes back to us. The messed up part about this is he still may become senator of Georgia. I'm like, keep in mind, Raphael Warnock, the other senator, who is running to keep his seat after a special election in Georgia, is having to compete with him. Herschel Walker, a Trump favorite, but everybody's like, oh, but Will, you're getting on him because he's with Trump, and every conservative's with Trump, and you just don't like him because of that. I listened to that man give 3 different speeches on 3 different occasions. I'm sorry, but somebody who's not in the ballpark of being qualified to run for politics shouldn't be running for Senate. If you said Jesus had multiple personality disorder, shouldn't be running for Senate. If you lied on your qualifications and got found out, you shouldn't be running for Senate. And at the same time, if you don't have the basic scientific principles of how air works, and the fact that we've been polluting more than most countries have, shouldn't be running for Senate. That's all I'm saying. But again, guys, I keep saying that's just two conservatives. 2 conservatives off the bat who more than likely will keep their positions in the House and Senate. Well, one of them more likely will keep their position in the House and Senate. Herschel Walker is hoping to get his foot in the Senate door, and that's a scary freaking thought, ain't it? But moving right along, guys, again, in another twist story, Elon Musk is basically trying to bow out of his $44 billion, that's $44 billion with a B, out of his Twitter acquisition deal. And Twitter saying, no, you want to buy us, now buy us.
Elon Musk has told Twitter he wants out of that $44 billion deal to buy the company.
In a regulatory filing released yesterday, a lawyer representing Musk accused Twitter of breaching multiple provisions of the original deal, which was signed back in April. And for more on this, here with us now is CNN's chief media correspondent, Brian Stelter. Brian, good morning to you. What else do we know about Musk's reversal here?
We know that this is setting up a massive legal battle, but Musk has lots of lawyers on his side, and Twitter probably has just as many on the other side. You know, it's been several months since Musk agreed to buy Twitter. He was offering a very high price, much higher than anyone else in the marketplace. And now there's an incredible amount of uncertainty about the future of Twitter because Musk seems to be trying to back out. Now, with Musk, you never quite know what's going on for sure. You've always got to be skeptical. That's why many people were skeptical about this deal when it was first announced. And I think now there's skepticism about whether he can get out of the deal. After all, when you agree to buy a company for $44 billion, it's not something you just write down in pencil. You've signed it in pen. You've signed it in ink. You have done a lot of different things to commit to actually going through with the transaction. He's trying to get out of it by saying that Twitter has broken its side of the deal by not being honest about fake accounts, bots, and trolls on the platform. But, you know, Musk had lots of time for what's known as due diligence to go ahead and think about whether to buy the company before he agreed. So we're going to see if he can get out of it or not.
And
I just find it amazing, honestly, that at first everybody was scared. Everybody was very nervous, number one, about Elon Musk buying Twitter. They were afraid that he was going to privatize it, that he was going to monopolize it, that it was going to change the fact of how we get free speech, that he was going to give Donald Trump back his spot on Twitter. And now he's like, well, you guys have lied about this deal, and I don't want no part of it, so I'm out. And you think Twitter would be like, cool, well, there's a nice little exit clause that you got to pay us if you decide to jump. It's just weird that Twitter all of a sudden now is like, wait, don't go, take us. No, we're going to force you to take us. Which, again, it just makes me wonder that, you know, as I said before, it makes me wonder about the status of these free social marketing and social arenas that we stay in. Because, you know, if they're owned by somebody, it's the highest bidder. I mean, just like you've seen with Minecraft, just like you've seen with Ring, just like you've seen with many other products out there. Once they reach a following, they eventually get bought up. Can't knock the innovators for cashing in on their investments and their designs, as they should. But with Twitter, it's like, why are you guys trying to hold on to Elon Musk so bad? I mean, as you can tell, his factories have multiple lawsuits for minorities. He can raise capital with no issue. Oh, and what's that other thing? Oh, he pays no taxes. That's the part where I just don't understand it. This is the same person that went to the UN and said, if you could find a way to use $6 billion to end world hunger, I'll pay it. UN showed him. He's been quiet ever since. But not surprising that this multi-billion-dollar man is not going to part with his billions because he doesn't like what he sees on Twitter. And it's amazing that he is still allowed to do all this. And like I said, the man pays no taxes. Moving right along, guys. The next thing I'm going to play is going to be very graphic, and it might be hard to watch, especially since this is doing with the Uvalde shooting. Unless you've been under a rock, someone had revealed the surveillance footage. And like I said, trigger warning on this, it may be tough to watch.
For almost 2 months, we have tried to understand why it took nearly 80 minutes for police to end the massacre that claimed 21 innocent lives at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. Tonight, some horrifying new insight. Let me warn you that what we're about to show you is disturbing on so many levels. Surveillance video from inside the school that has just been made public, revealing the decisions that cost time and lives. The video shows a police response that appears at moments uncoordinated, confused, with officers in apparent disagreement over how to proceed. It begins outside, capturing the shooter crashing his car, his sprint to the school, then entering a classroom where he fired volley after volley from his assault weapon. All as a crowd of responding officers, many of them heavily armed, waited down a hall for an order to breach the door. But does it show the whole picture? Tonight, parents of some of the deceased children are expressing their anger about the video. Sam Brock has details.
After weeks of agonizing waiting, the Austin American-Statesman, along with KVUE, releasing a highly edited 4-minute compilation of videos, including never-before-seen surveillance from inside the school, outside the building, and police body cam footage, shedding more light on how the law enforcement response unfolded. The gunman walks across the parking lot and into the school at 11:33. Casually carrying a rifle and turning a corner in the hallway, a young student comes around the corner as the shooter walks down the hall. Seconds later, gunfire erupts, lasting for more than 2 minutes. The young child runs away. 3 minutes later, the first officers enter the school. As the gunfire continues, some officers approach the classrooms, while others hold back. More shots, and they retreat. 19 minutes after the gunman entered, heavily armed reinforcements arrive with ballistic shields, holding up their weapons but standing at the end of the hallway, waiting for nearly half an hour. Eventually, a unit moves in a stack formation toward the classroom door, others again holding back. 48 minutes after the gunman entered, more rounds and an audible conversation. One officer seen getting hand sanitizer while the gunman is still a threat in the classroom. After 77 minutes, a volley of gunfire when Border Patrol officers finally breached the classroom.
Their sense of urgency did not seem to be really felt or seen in that video. Instead, we know that those 19 children and 2 teachers were inside that classroom, and it took more than an hour for them to finally breach the door.
The whole police system in Uvalde failed us.
Vincent Salazar's 4th grade granddaughter, Layla, was killed.
What aspect of the video do you think is going to be the most painful for you, but necessary to see?
When they sat back because they got gunfire, they retreated. The officers ain't trained to retreat when they're going to do. They have to save these children, and they did not do that.
The video's release follows weeks of pain and outcry from some of Uvalde's youngest community members.
I usually run into my sister in the restroom.
Like Jasmine Cazares, who lost her sister, Jackie.
I forgot to say good morning. And I think that's going to haunt me for the rest of my life. I'm doing this for you, sister.
Families trying to reconcile systemic failures and an apparent lack of answers.
The answers we don't get is why they didn't act to protect these babies.
Sam, what more are we hearing from families of the victims and seeing this video?
Lester, these families waited almost 50 days to see video from inside of the school. A group of them are together and expected to react tonight, though I'm told many are infuriated at the time it took just to breach the classroom. It's one thing to hear about it, Lester. It's another to see it in video and process. Lester.
Yeah. So it's another thing to turn around and sit there and see it in video that an hour plus that the good guys with guns, it's amazing to me, and I will still sit there and say this, where are the all lives matter people? Because again, that like most things, it's basically a counterpoint to Black Lives Matter. But the last thing the journalist said was the parents at the end. Parents of those lost children that were murdered. They were waiting for surveillance. They were waiting for answers. And keep in mind, this was leaked. This wasn't that they saw it first. This wasn't of the fact that they saw anything. No, they saw this in the same sense that we did. Imagine you losing your child and that the actual surveillance footage was put out for the world to see before you. At the same time, you now see the allotted time that officers can sit there and, we're not going down there. Well, let me get some hand sanitizer. Let me just get some hand sanitizer. Let me do all this. An hour plus, which is the reason why the police chief, who was the commander on site, was allowed to resign. Surprisingly, he was allowed to resign. He should be brought up on charges. Every officer that was sitting there in that hallway for an hour plus do not deserve to be police officers. They don't. If one gunman with an AR style rifle kept all of you guys from going down there, you don't need to be law enforcement officers. You don't. And if I was a person, if I was the mayor or the governor, but we know Governor Greg Abbott's not going to do anything. But if I was the mayor and I saw that happen, every officer that was in that surveillance video that was sitting there waiting an hour plus to breach will have lost their jobs. I'm sorry, would have lost their jobs. Because the simple fact of the matter is, this is why I sit there and say the whole argument of, the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. You had at least more than a dozen good guys sitting right there, and nobody was going down that hallway until an hour plus later. Imagine that the gunman had that much time. Imagine if you only had 5 minutes. Imagine if you only had less than 3 minutes. Simple fact of the matter is, folks, the so-called good guys saw the gunman and went the other direction. And now, as I said before, DPS, who's over this, is trying to save face, but they can't save face. If I was some parents, I'd be reaching out to DOJ. The federal government the Department of Justice will need to look into this from a federal standpoint, because there were a lot of mistakes being made, from waiting an hour plus to go in and breach to some fact of the matter is, why in the world? And keep in mind, Texas has some of the loosest gun laws out there, because this was a kid that wasn't a terrorist. He was a terrorist, don't get me wrong. But how he purchased the firearms was legal. And that is the whole entire reason why gun reform is needed. At the same time, yeah, if I was parents, I'd be good and pissed. Not a doubt in my mind about that. But moving right along about people that are pissed about, like I said, we talked about Roe versus Wade and the fact that Biden and the Democrats are scrambling to do what they can right now. But I always said it best, you should have impacted the Supreme Court, because a conservative-heavy Supreme Court has never done right by anybody. If you don't believe me, ask FDR. He turned around and literally threatened the Supreme Court by overpacking to get things done. That alone should tell you everything. But with that being said, the Democrats are trying to make strides going forward, especially with making the abortion pill an over-the-counter drug to be approved by the FDA.
Is telling hospitals that doctors must perform abortions if the life of a mother is at stake. It comes as the FDA considers a request to make birth control pills available for sale over the counter. Stephanie Goss joins me. Stephanie, starting with the move by the administration on emergency care, what could that mean?
Lester, today the Biden administration reminded hospitals that an existing federal law requires them to provide abortions if the life of the mother is at risk, even in states where the procedure is now banned. It says that federal law preempts state laws, many of which have recently changed. This as the FDA considers making birth control pills available over the counter for the first time ever. When the birth control pill was first approved, it ushered in a sexual revolution.
Birth control, especially the pill, provided women the choice.
More than 60 years later, a French company is asking the FDA to approve an over-the-counter version at a very different time in America's history, just weeks after the overturning of Roe v. Wade. In that decision, the Supreme Court said the right to contraception would not be affected, but in a concurring opinion, Justice Clarence Thomas suggested it should be. HRA Pharma says it started the FDA application process 7 years ago, and the timing is coincidental.
Do you think it's possible that women may go to the doctor less because they no longer need to go to the doctor for the pill?
There is some concern that people only end up going to the doctor because they need birth control. It's not right to hold birth control hostage by a prescription when it is not scientifically necessary. Just so that we can get people in to see us.
It comes as the Biden administration faces increased pressure to take action on reproductive rights issues, including potentially declaring a public health emergency over abortion.
Something I'm asked the folks, the medical people in the administration to look at, whether I have the authority to do that and what impact that would have.
But the administration says it will let the FDA dictate the timeline. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists is hopeful.
Over-the-counter birth control is going to be helpful for everyone, but it certainly is going to be helpful for those who are most marginalized in our country.
A major hurdle to getting birth control pills could soon be a thing of the past.
And honestly, I'm all for it. Because again, for all those that wonder, I sit there and say the entire time that yes, we should have preserved the right to choose. We should have preserved it. Not because how you feel about it, we should just preserve the right. A woman's body is her own business. And the fact that Roe versus Wade and that several states had trigger laws in effect to outlaw abortion, and even so going so far as to outlaw abortion at 3 weeks, is insane. So, of course, the alternative is if you are going to take away or try to shut down Planned Parenthood in other areas, then yes, the actual logical conclusion is to make abortion pills over-the-counter accessible. And why not? Because, again, if a man can get Viagra pills, a woman should be able to get abortion pills. That's always my argument. It's always my argument. Because, if your lower region stops working anymore, it's God's will. The fact that you're taking Viagra kind of spits in his face. Every time I've said that, crickets. Because it's true. Men have governance on their own body without intervention. Because I said it once and I'll say it again. If men could be pregnant, there would be an abortion clinic about as abundant as every Starbucks. Tell me I'm wrong. Moving right along, guys. Again, the attack on the Capitol, they are actually having the hearings. And this one I have to play in its entirety because Liz Cheney, a woman who is fighting for her seat against the Republican coalition in her home state, literally has said the one thing that we've all sat there and said that needs to be said about Trump.
The chair recognizes a gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Cheney, for a closing statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, let me put what you have seen today in a broader context. At the very outset of our hearings, we described several elements of President Trump's multi-part plan to overturn the 2020 election. Our hearings have now covered all but one of those elements. An organized campaign to persuade millions of Americans of a falsehood that the 2020 election was stolen by widespread fraud. A corrupt effort to pressure Vice President Pence to refuse to count electoral votes. An effort to corrupt the U.S. Department of Justice. Efforts to pressure state election officials and legislators to change state election results. A scheme to create and submit fake electoral slates from multiple states. And today, you saw how President Trump summoned a mob to Washington for January 6th, and then knowing that that mob was armed, directed that mob to the United States Capitol. Every one of these elements of the planning for January 6th is an independently serious matter. They were all ultimately focused on overturning the election, and they all have one other thing in common. Donald Trump participated in each substantially and personally. He oversaw or directed the activity of those involved. Next week, we will return to January 6th itself. As we have shown in prior hearings, Donald Trump and his legal team, led by Rudy Giuliani, were working on January 6th to delay or halt Congress's counting of electoral votes. The mob attacking and invading the Capitol on that afternoon of January 6th was achieving that result. And for multiple hours, Donald Trump refused to intervene to stop it. He would not instruct the mob to leave or condemn the violence. He would not order them to evacuate the Capitol and disperse. The many pleas for help from Congress did no good. His staff insisted that President Trump call off the attack. He would not. Here are a few of the many things you will hear next week from Mr. Cipollone.
Is that right?
I was and others were as well.
Was it necessary for you to continue to push for a statement directing people to leave all the way through that period of time until it was ultimately issued after?
I felt it was my obligation to continue to push for that, and others felt it was their obligation as well.
Would it have been possible at any moment for the president to walk down to the podium in the briefing room and talk to the nation at any time between when you first gave him that advice at 2 o'clock and 4:17 when the video statement went out? Would that have been possible?
Would it have been possible?
Yes.
Yes, it would have been possible.
And you will hear that Donald Trump never picked up the phone that day to order his administration to help. This is not ambiguous. He did not call the military. His Secretary of Defense received no order. He He did not call his attorney general. He did not talk to the Department of Homeland Security. Mike Pence did all of those things. Donald Trump did not. We will walk through the events of January 6th next week, minute by minute. And one more item. After our last hearing, President Trump tried to call a witness in our investigation, a witness you have not yet seen in these hearings. That person declined to answer or respond to President Trump's call and instead alerted their lawyer to the call. Their lawyer alerted us, and this committee has supplied that information to the Department of Justice. Let me say one more time, we will take any effort to influence witness testimony very seriously. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, Donnie boy, the pipes are calling. And I do mean that. I mean, because a lot of people are wondering. For a lot of people, they're just like, well, what does this actually mean? Okay, well, first and foremost, the fact that this has went from an investigation to now piling a case. Because that's all it is at this point. The commission at this point is now filing a case against Donald J. Trump. And pick your charges: sedition, possible treason, terrorism, inciting a riot, starting an insurrection. At this point, they're building a case. It's no longer about investigating. And if you've been watching these hearings, the amount of information that has came out is staggering. It's staggering and cannot be avoided. So what does that mean for us? Well, that means that Donald Trump's 2024 presidential hopes might have a little bit of a shadow of a doubt on them. That's all I'm saying. But again, I do think it's interesting that the same woman that voted to impeach Trump was the same woman that just almost like she just gave the benediction to his funeral, which in this case, his political funeral. But we will follow that it comes along. But moving on, though, I did want to cover this very quickly. Starbucks is closing 16 U.S. stores. Now, you think Starbucks, one of the most important and busiest spots for coffee I've ever seen, especially here in Tennessee, that Starbucks is closing 16 stores for quote-unquote repeated safety issues. Those safety issues including drug use and other disruptive behaviors that threaten staff. They're going to close 6 stores in their hometown of Seattle, 6 in Los Angeles, 2 in Portland, and 1 each in Philadelphia and Washington. However, they did say, but those people at those stores will be given the opportunity to transfer stores. Now, usually I'm like, yeah, well, everybody else there say, well, businesses and things of that nature happens. But I can't help but just wonder. Because keep in mind, guys, we've covered on this podcast that a few Starbucks stores have just joined the labor union. And I just can't, how can I put this so nicely? It's a little hard to sit there and say this isn't suspect because a quote unquote, nobody, I mean, there's a reason why we have laws that says you can't retaliate against those who are trying to join a labor union or talk about a labor union. There's actually laws in place to prevent retaliation. It's actually a suable thing that people can do and actually win back damages. However, I find it interesting that we now have about 4 to 5 stores, 4 to 5 Starbucks stores that did become unionized. And Starbucks' answer is, we're going to close down stores. And I can't help but wonder the timing. And I would say it best, timing is everything. Some stores go unionized, some stores get closed. You guys have heard me say this. You guys have heard me say my Michael Dell story all the time, especially here in Nashville. Michael Dell hated unions. If we talked about unions, if it got back to him, he would close said center down, pack up, and move to a more corporate-friendly state. Although out of Tennessee, I can't remember. Aside from Tennessee being number 1 in my mind, I don't know what I would say is more corporate-friendly for conservatives in Tennessee. But like I said before, it's just the timing of it all, that they become unionized and Starbucks starts closing down stores. Almost in the same sense with people that work in fast food and the food service industry want more money, but you see more kiosks at fast food joints. And I'm sorry, I want to be able to have my order screwed up by a live person and not by Skynet. That's just me. But moving on, guys, if you're like me, you're looking into the housing market and you're just wondering where it's going to cool down eventually, well, signs are good.
Are backing out of deals and a potential sign the red-hot housing market is cooling.
Things are really shifting away from being a super strong seller's market to kind of starting this rebalance.
Nationwide, some 60,000 agreements fell through in June, according to real estate firm Redfin. That's nearly 15% of homes under contract that month, marking the highest percentage on record aside from the earliest days in the pandemic. Among the most affected areas, Las Vegas, New Orleans, and many hotspots in Florida.
Demand is definitely decreased.
Sean McLeod works in Orlando, where research shows roughly 1 in 4 buyers are calling it quits.
Not every buyer is able to purchase in this market under these conditions.
Industry experts say the canceled buyer largely falls into 2 categories: those who are using the slowing housing market to get better deals, and people who are priced out by rising mortgage rates. The 30-year fixed rate nearly doubling since January, now just under 6%. That could mean an increase of hundreds of dollars in monthly payments, especially with listing prices at record highs.
What kind of tips do you have for people who are worried about the volatile mortgage rates?
The first thing to do is really understand your finances and get those finances in order. Really shop around and find a lender that's able to lock in a rate for you.
Home hunters hoping for the balance of power to shift back to the buyer. Emily.
Well, it may take a while, but it's actually getting there. Because the thing about it is, guys, like I've been saying, when it comes to this situation that we're in, that for the longest point, you had big market firms, you had these hedge investors, mostly New York stock types that had plenty of money to burn, coming in here and buying up property, building up houses, buying houses, and raising the property value to insane amounts. I was kind of wondering when that bubble was going to be bursting, because as a potential home buyer myself, I don't want to pay 4 or 5 times as much as the house is worth, only to watch that property value come down when the market cools off. But it looks like signs are heading that way, because the reality of it is, unless you are in the 6-figure income and up category, you are going to be very price conscious about the next house you purchase. But we'll follow that story as it comes along. President Biden is kind of taking a victory lap a little bit, guys. I don't know how to say this about his gun bill. And I have said many a times on here how I feel about that gun bill. But again, I'm not the only one that sat there and said that Biden needs to do more instead of taking a victory lap.
Almost 2,000 gathered today on the South Lawn to mark the most hard-fought bipartisan achievement of the Biden era, the first new gun safety law in nearly 3 decades.
Lives will be saved today and tomorrow because of this.
One father, whose son died at Parkland, interrupted, shouting that more must be done.
Let him talk. Let him talk.
The president hailed the new law as progress, as his political standing appears precarious. A new poll from the New York Times finds 64% of Democratic voters say they would prefer a different leader in the 2024 election. Mr. Biden's age cited most. He'd be 82 right after the election.
We need some younger people in the office. Yeah. That's, bottom line.
Should be an extent to everybody. Yeah, it's kind of up there.
However, the vice president said Sunday they expect to be in the race.
He intends to run. And if he does, I intend to run with him.
One clear warning, only 13% of Americans said they think the country is on the right track.
I feel like we're taking so many steps back right now. Am I right?
To counter doubters, the White House touts the strong job market and gas prices down 33 cents in the last month. Tomorrow, the president heads to Israel and Saudi Arabia, where he will push to increase oil supply to ease gas prices.
Can we get that price down, and can we keep it down?
That new polling does offer a positive sign for the White House, showing President Biden a few points ahead of Donald Trump when voters are asked about a potential rematch in 2020.
Okay, so many things I want to cover here. This is why I say this all the time when people ask me about Biden. I'm like, people don't understand. Biden is honestly more conservative than he is Democrat. He is. I mean, if you want to be honest, it's what we call a moderate Democrat. Moderate Democrats are basically just Republican light. And he is exactly that. For example, You got to remember at the beginning of his term, he was more progressive. He wanted to push for green bills. He wanted to push for reform on police action. He wanted to push for voting rights. He wanted to push for minimum wage increases. He wanted to push the Build Back America plan. He wanted to, get his infrastructure bill passed. And now he's went far right. We are going to, talked about the gun bill, which, let me go ahead and say this. That gun bill is a small step, not a big one. And let's just be honest about that. I talked about the gun bill on there because this gun bill paraded more to conservatives than it did to actually stopping violence. Giving states incentive to engage red flag laws. What states need incentive beyond preserving human life to actually have red flag laws in their state? But you know what it doesn't have in there? It doesn't have raising the age of purchasing a gun from 18 to 21 in a federal standing. It doesn't. In Texas, still now, where there's been multiple shootings, the age to still buy a long gun is 18. However, to buy alcohol, you must be 21. One is a federal mandate, one is a state mandate. I'll let you figure out which one is which. That's the problem. And the fact of the matter is the current bipartisan law still doesn't go far enough. Because instead of raising the age from 18 to 21, it says it does a review of those 18 of those between 18 but not 21. Will do a juvenile review to see if said person has the issues. That's a compromise, folks. That's not what we asked for. What we asked for was raising the age to buy a handgun, to buy a weapon to 21 across all red flag states in every state. We wanted to reduce multiple clips of ammunition carrying more than 15 to 30 rounds. We wanted that. We wanted, anything bigger than that, you shouldn't have for reasons beyond my comprehension. You really don't need it. At the same time, we wanted to push universal background checks across all sales, not just commercial. We also wanted to, even go so far as to ban certain types of weapons that individuals shouldn't have. Because we've seen that in Uvalde, where apparently, if the good guy with the gun has an AR-15 and the bad guy with the gun has an AR-15, the good guy with the gun is still going to sit at the back of the hall fighting hand sanitizer. Those things should have actually been a part of the bill. But let's be honest, conservatives do what they do best. They protect the gun nuts. They protect the homosexuals. They protect an 18-year-old's right to choose to buy a gun. Not to, choose to have an abortion, because we know how they feel about that with them and Jesus. But to sit there and say that gun bill was a large step forward is a very grave misstep. Even more so that Biden, who is, again, like I said, more Republican talking about gun laws being changed, and now going to the Middle East, because let's be honest, the number one producer of oil is in Saudi Arabia. Russia's number two. Now he's going to the Middle East to see about how to grease the wheels with the Saudi Arabian family to increase oil production, to basically lower the cost of gas, which gas is going down. But at the same time, we are still finding ourselves on dinosaur juice. When there was such a big push for electric cars, there was such a big push for renewable energy, there was such a big push for the Green Deal that could possibly help us combat climate change, which, by the way, that is still a warning, a ticking clock for a lot of us. And yet he's acting more conservative than he is Democrat. And at the same time, will he run again? Honestly, I don't want him to. Not because of the fact of his age, but because of the fact that we have seen what happens when you have a moderate Dem in office. I want a progressive Democrat. I want someone who's progressive, who is really willing to take the risk and say, I want to push these policies forward, and have the guts to sit there and say, these people in Congress are the sole reason why you don't have everything that you have. Let's change that. Let's put term limits in the Senate. Let's put term limits on the House. Let's put term limits, and they can't serve more than the president. Two consecutive terms they can serve. They got to sit one out if they want to come back. And just watch how things happen. Watch what happens when we start changing the salaries of those in the Senate and the House. Let's also, if you're running for Senate or House and you win your seat, you cannot invest in stocks. We cannot trust you to put everything in a blind trust that's managed by somebody else, because you still have access to it. you shouldn't be allowed to play the lottery. Let's reverse Citizens United and actually get this money out of politics. Let's make lobbying illegal, made a felony. I mean, they already made giving food and water to somebody who is going to vote a felony. Why not make lobbying a felony? That's what I would want from a progressive candidate, because we've seen what happens when moderates and conservatives take over, but it's time to see it as a progressive. Biden is not progressive, and Kamala Harris, I never thought I'd say this, and I'm trying to be very nice about it, but Kamala Harris, by far the most, it's almost like I forgot she was VP, but she's been ineffective. What's been her policy? What's been her standpoints? The only shining mark in history that she has is that because of her vote, that Kajani Brown Jackson was able to join the Supreme Court, because it was a 50-50 and she was the tiebreaker. That's her only contribution to history. And that's sad, because we would figure with our first woman being Madam Vice President, she would have a lot more effect than Mike Pence. I'm just saying, when Mike Pence is the bar, a very low bar, and yet for some odd reason, she still comes under it. Instead of just taking a single step over it. I will never understand it for as long as I live. But I will say this, before we get to our feel good news segment. I just don't see, if Biden is smart, he will run out his term and put someone else up there who will be able to share exactly the progressive side. Because with women, LGBTQ plus, and minorities right now, they want someone they can get behind. I don't think Biden and Kamala Harris is it right now. That's just me. But we're going to move on to our feel good story, guys, because usually how the Frack guy here, we cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom, sometimes includes faith in humanity. But hey, it is hump day. Tomorrow's Thursday, which is Friday Eve. And we will leave you guys out with some good vibrations, and hopefully this story will do it, because anybody who's ever been on a plane, when you get stuck on the runway, or taxi as they call it, and there's that uncomfortable way of just trying to, get to a gate to where you can get off the plane and realize you're back on solid ground because you're a terrible flyer. Okay, that just might be me. Sorry. But anyway, these kids, very talented children, decided to serenade the crowd with an old Disney favorite.
Back on a plane on the tarmac, but with an orchestra. Tonight here, yet another flight delay, but this one is definitely different. Grounded 90 minutes at Newark, the flight attendants noticed the children's orchestra on board. They asked them to perform. One dad holding his baby boy up to sea. The song from Pirates of the Caribbean. And the passengers, well, they wanted an encore. "18 children from 10 to 17, part of the nonprofit student performance group Music City Strings from Nashville. Playing right up until they were cleared for takeoff. Then the flight to Germany, and for that group, on to Croatia. Their performance there. And right here tonight,
hi, David.
Elaine Krell from Music City Strings on why they performed on that flight.
Kind of help them forget about all those annoying thoughts of, oh man, I'm stuck here. This is annoying. They could forget all that and just enjoy the music. Hi, David.
And Ella Goggins on the universal power of music.
We were on a plane with people from many different countries who spoke so many different languages, but everyone understood what we were doing and it brought them joy.
Now that is pretty cool. And Music Strings here from Nashville, Tennessee. Of course, they had to play Rocky Top. As a Bama fan, I cannot tell you. I'm sorry, as a Bama fan living in Tennessee, I cannot tell you how many times I hated hearing Rocky Top. I've heard it for almost 40 doggone years. I could literally, figuratively go without it. I kid you not. But music soothes all and connects us all. And so therefore, I enjoy it, and the kids did a good deed. But yeah, I just thought it was cool. That being said, guys, we're going to give it a wrap here, guys. I do thank you all for watching, for liking, for letting people know this is live. I certainly appreciate that. Let me know what you think of the new background. I'm still kind of tweaking a little bit, so bear with it, brother. I know we're trying new things here. I mean, I'm trying to dress up the newsroom. I'm trying to make it more newsy. I'm not wearing no suit though, but I'm trying to make it more newsy. But anyway, that being said, some shameless fucking break it down here, guys. I do want to shout out to my buddy Vaughn, Big VZA Dot. You can find him on all socials at Big VZA Dot. And of course, Vaughn was put on Facebook. As he does have a new page, he's back to making beats again. He feels inspired, and therefore the beats is rolling out, and you can get with him on how you can make those beats your own. But definitely check him out, Vaughn Westman on Facebook, Big VZA Dot on all socials. As for yours truly, guys, my IG handle is still BlackFox447. You can follow me there on Instagram, as I usually do post everything from reviews of shows and TV shows, video games, and movies and whatnot, to also gym stuff, because I do a couple push-ups. At the same time, guys, I am all about positivity, moving people forward, and simply put, just trying to do things different, because let's be honest with you guys, we have had a rough, and I do mean rough, couple of years. And I'm just saying, I'm all about the fact of, being kinder, being decent. I'm not saying you got to be overly good Samaritan, but I'm just saying that you just, be decent, be kind, say hi. You don't know, but the whole act of saying hi and checking on somebody, you may do more than just being polite. You actually might save a life, because we're all fighting battles that no one else may know about. So like I said, be kind. That's all I ask. That being said, guys, COVID is still around, and the Omicron and its variants are still out there, like a bad version of a Michael Bay film. So again, guys, if you're going in heavily congested areas, please wear a mask. Please do everything that you can to protect yourself and protect others, and that's how we're all going to get through this. Also, I'm just going to blow this up right here. If you copy and paste this link into your browser, it'll take you to my link tree. That's the YouTube and Facebook groups for all of my podcasts, How the Frack Got Here, Get Bit, of course, Off Limits Podcast. Definitely like them, share them, let people know about them. And also, like I said before, guys, I am all for criticism. You let me know if you love this. Let me know if you don't love it. I want to know what works and what doesn't work, so I can make the next show better. And like I said, kind of messing with some things around here, trying to make things a little bit more interesting, a little bit more fun. So like I said, let me know, so that way I know I can make it better. Can't know what I'm doing unless I get some. Can't know what I'm doing unless I get some feedback. That line almost took me out. That being said, guys, that being said, as I try to wrap this up before my tongue decides to call today, what we do and How the Frack We Got Here, it's all about being informed. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're trying to give you all the information that you can, but we also provide a logical perspective view to go along with it. We do a lot of things we do a lot better when we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then, like elect our first black woman to the Supreme Court, electing our first black woman to the Federal Board of Governors, and even our first lady to a higher commanding position in the U.S. Navy. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's why we keep asking ourselves all the time, how come everything goes up by my paycheck? How come we're still electing different politicians, still the same old game? And most importantly, how the frack we got here. Thank you all for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and we will get through this all together, hopefully, because this intro almost took me out. Peace!